The Logitech G403 Prodigy Wireless is a right-handed ergonomically shaped mouse with 6 programmable buttons, and this includes the DPI switch on top. It is essentially identical to the recently reviewed G Pro in terms of performance, and so houses again the acclaimed PMW3366 sensor exclusive to Logitech and featuring a DPI from 200 through to 12,000 with no smoothing at any step. The difference here between this and the G Pro is simply the outer shell, as is the case with quite a few Logitech products today, and obviously the optional wireless functionality. Now the G403 has a height of approximately 43mm, a length of 124 and a width of 68, with our wireless edition coming in at around 107 grams without both the cable and optional 10 gram weight. In that respect, it's still light enough to throw around and close to my usual death ladder, and I typically consider anything that's under about 110 grams to be just fine for me, pending ergonomics and size for competitive play. Though, if you're somebody that does want lighter, the wired version is approximately 87 or 97 grams. Now the on-run buttons are rated for 20 million clicks and feel both tactile and responsive, with no pre-travel on any button, and you can also roll your thumb to activate the side buttons, which is very much appreciated and something that other vendors often miss the beat on when creating a mouse. But if you're interested, here is a listen to the clicks. Now my only criticism surrounding the mouse is its back slope or hump out of the box. I felt it rose to its highest point a little too quickly, and I'd personally have preferred something more gradual, similar to that of my death ladder, the G402 or G502, as I felt I initially get more vertical movement with something that doesn't immediately touch my palm. But perhaps in that respect it means I'm more of a hybrid palm or claw grip player. I mean, I've never really thought of it like that, but in some ways it does make sense. And I don't perceive this to be a huge problem, but just bear in mind it might take a couple of hours for you just to adapt, depending on the mouse you're coming from. So very quickly, blasting through the G403 wireless in LGS, it's pretty much identical to the functionality of the G Pro, aside from obviously the wireless aspect, which gives us the battery indicator on the upper left and in the tab down here, and in settings menu as well. If we go to G403 no notification, we can actually show a battery indicator in the upper right of the screen and on the taskbar when it's low, but we'll get into that later. Under here as well, make sure when you first get the mouse you update the firmware. There was one released on the 17th of November, so just better safe than sorry in case your mouse was manufactured before that was actually implemented. Also, the ability to enable angle snapping, it's unfortunate there isn't an acceleration option or a power off for this, because there are some players out there that like angle snapping, helps you draw straight lines, and was good back in the day for Call of Duty when you're aiming more horizontal than you are vertical. Other than that, you can choose not to run it on startup, which is great, and it has game integration for stuff like Counter-Strike to show health and whether the bomb has been planted. Just neat extras that I don't care too much about here, but is useful, as is the Overwolf, I suppose, if that's something you're interested in. But if we hit OK and go back to the beginning, obviously we can run the mouse through onboard memory, which for me is great for someone that travels to events. I don't have to worry about A, having user rights on PC, B, having the internet, or C, having the time to install it, because all my settings are going to come with me on the mouse, DPI, etc. So that's cool. But if you're someone that games more exclusively at home, you do have automatic game detection, which allows us to assign game executable files to our different profiles, and that will remember pretty much everything at the bottom of the screen here, including button assignments. So if you have different things from game to game, that might be good for you. But as I say, I use onboard memory pretty much exclusively, and here under DPI we've got our 5 DPI steps, increments of 50 from 200 to 12,000 with absolutely no smoothing. The important part being we can go 400 DPI or lower for the games that just have poor sensitivity implementations and don't allow you to go low enough in terms of centimeter per 360. You've also got polling rate, DPI shift if you want it, and as well hidden functions under assign new command called G shift, which when held down gives us a secondary function to pretty much everything on the mouse. And I think if you had a keyboard you could assign G shift to the keyboard as well, and that might be a neat extra to maybe add some extra flair to the mouse. But next tab along we have our RGB lighting. We've got 2 zones, the logo and the scroll wheel, with off, color cycle and breathing effect. If we set off, we can choose specific colors like the NVC logo color, the pinky red. I prefer to leave colour cycle, and if you had a G810, a G933 and a PowerPlay mousepad, you could also sync everything up by clicking them, or just a couple of things. Next tab along is our battery indicator, and kind of ties in with RGB lighting because with full RGB colour cycle we have 11 hours remaining. With the lights off this will bump up to about 16, and with cyan breathing it gives us an extra hour to just the full RGB colour cycle at 12, and a bit of information as well as to what's going on, which is cool. I would recommend probably charging every couple of days just to be safe rather than sorry. It's kind of the downside without having the PowerPlay functionality of the G403 is that you will have to plug it in every now and then, but not a big deal because it will indicate and let you know when you need to get charging. But if you are attending an event, I'd recommend setting the lights off just to get most out of it. Our next tab along is surface tuning, which allows us to adjust lift-off distance and also correct any potential issues. I, for OCD reasons, always leave factory default on, which on the G Pro was under 2 DVDs, and when we turned it on, it became under 1 in terms of liftoff, which is 1.2 to 2.4 millimeters. Again, just something to play about, and we'll get into that later. Our next tab along is our heat map. Press a load of buttons a couple of times, hit stop, and we get to see, with different colors, key presses per minute. Neat extra, I suppose. But yeah, again, just overall happy with the G403 wireless LGS implementation here. Like the G Pro, it's got a couple of things I'd add that I mentioned at the beginning, but for the most part it's perfect and a job well done. So all of our tests for the G403 are going to be in wireless mode, but I have no reason to suspect there's any mouse acceleration inherent on this PMW3366 implementation. But from the left to the right of our pad until it stops tracking, we end up just past the wall, and again acceleration can be good providing it can be controlled. Again, going quickly, and a final time really quick, dead on, same space, some small amount of human error of course, but perfect implementation, meaning if you're somebody that likes acceleration you can add your preferred amount, and if you don't want it you don't have to have it, so no complaint whatsoever. So moving into Shoot Mania to look at the mouse button debounce time with a feature called variable jumping. So pressing mouse 2 to jump will do a full height, and tapping it we do a small height. And in theory we should be able to tap lots of times in quick succession and continue to do lots and lots of mini jumps. As you can see, no problems whatsoever, so we can tap and go into immediate sprint. And with a higher debounce time, this might actually be a mid-height jump after we start tapping, because the button doesn't register the next click quick enough, which can be especially a problem in Quake Live, where you've got mouse 1 to fire and mouse 2 to jump, and pressing both together in theory should do a full height rocket jump, but there are mice on the market that don't allow you to do that, and the reason why some people have had rocket jump scripts in the past where they bind both actions to a single button. But I'm happy to report no issues whatsoever with the G403 wireless. I can do full height rocket jumps, pretty much anything I want. It is an absolutely perfect mouse button implementation from Logitech, and I would expect nothing less, to be honest, at this point. So for our final test, and I'm glad I did this because it's the only thing that I found that separates it from the G Pro, it's lift-off distance with the G403 wireless. Now if you cast your eyes back to the G Pro review, you remember that a DVD is 1.2 millimeters in height, and the G Pro tracked at 1 but not 2, meaning lift-off distance with factory default calibration was between 1.2 and 2.4. But on the G403 wireless, if we go to surface tuning, you can see we're on factory default already, and it does not track at 1 DVD, meaning lift-off distance out of the box is slightly lower, and surface tuning would only serve to bring that down further and or correct any issues you're having with the sensor. So a great implementation. If you're a fan of lower lift-off distance, this mouse is going to suit you just fine.
3, 2, 1, fight.
So with all of that out of the way, how was gaming on the G403 and specifically using it as a wireless mouse? Well, in all honesty, quite scary. I mean, it's practically impossible to discern a difference between using it in both wireless and wired mode, and the only issue, if you can even call it that, is that it's slightly heavier than its wired alternative, and if Logitech didn't offer that lighter edition, I'd happily use the G403 wireless and never have a problem with it. It is a little weird though, mentally that is, to get over the hurdle that is using a wireless mouse. I mean, since when should that ever be a thing for competitive players? But there have been examples of Counter-Strike Go players such as Stewie and Automatic from Cloud9 who have performed at majors and won tournaments using the wireless Logitech mice with these latest sensors. And although I believe Stewie uses something else now, I can honestly see why it worked for them. It's something you'll have to try if you get the chance, because I personally had absolutely no issues with tracking enemy model directional changes in Quake or hitting people peeking out of corners in Counter-Strike. I actually think the buttons are quicker in wireless mode on the G403 wireless to my Death Adder Elite, and it's surprising how much I didn't think I felt cable drag until I tried it as well. But to conclude though, it really depends on what you're happy using, right? If you're looking for a wireless mouse, then Logitech have clearly done their research, because the mouse is brilliant, perfect even for the right person. But as far as my recommendation would go, it would be toward the G403 wired, purely for the fact that it is the same shape but lighter. And it really comes down to your current mouse and its weight, because at the end of the day it's all personal preference, and this isn't a heavy mouse, as I mentioned at the beginning. But if I was to make any suggestions for a future revision of a wireless Logitech mouse, it would be a lighter mouse wheel button, as I do think it's quite heavy, a more gradual slope at the back of it as we've mentioned, and to look toward the MX Master 2S mouse, and maybe allowing us to purchase multiple Logitech unifying USB receivers, because for some of us out there that have a gaming PC and a streaming PC, being able to connect a wireless mouse to both of them and switch on the underside could be the perfect streaming PC / competitive gamers mouse for use at home. But that pretty much wraps it up. I hope you've enjoyed the video, and if you have any questions or comments, you can leave them down below and I'll get back to you. And don't forget, I do stream again on Twitch every day from 6 PM, and if you've tried a Logitech wireless mouse, what are your thoughts on it? And are there any shapes out there like the G Pro you'd like to see them implement this tech too? I definitely like to try a power play pad in future, just right now I do think it's too small for me compared to the G640, but I definitely like the direction it's going. And you know what my ultimate dream is now that I think about it? For Logitech and Microsoft to collaborate on the 3.0 shape. That would be dreamy. If you have enjoyed the video, give it a thumbs up, make sure you subscribe for more in future, and I'll catch you next time. Take care.